For today's card, I'll be using Distress Oxide inks, and I will be doing the ink smooshing technique. I recently have been destashing my craft room and came across a piece of DSP that had houses on it. My initial thought was to just get rid of it. I haven't used it yet. Who knows if I'm ever going to use it? Then I thought about it for a minute as the craft hoarder that I generally am, and determined that I should keep it because I do not have any house stamps. And it ended up working out perfect for me because I have a friend that met a huge milestone in her life, and this particular house paper worked out exactly how I needed it to. So I went ahead and smooshed 3 different Distress Oxide inks onto a glass mat and sprayed it with water. From there, I took the piece of DSP with the houses and smooshed it in the ink. I just kind of tapped it, filled in spaces where I thought it needed more ink. And I just kept doing that until I had the colors exactly where I wanted them, or as exactly as you can get when you're doing ink smooshing. And then I am going to make sure that this is dry all the way through. If I want to add splatters in a bit to this to give it some more detail, and if this isn't dry, the splatters are just going to smear all over the card. So I spent quite a bit of time making sure that it was dry front to back. As you can see here, I am using a Stampin' Up! Heat gun. That is what I currently have, as I was a demonstrator, so I have a lot of Stampin' Up! Supplies that are wonderful supplies, and I'll continue using until they break. So at this point, I went ahead and started adding some splatter, just using the leftover ink and water mix on my glass mat. I'm using a large brush, and then to get different size splatters, you can raise your brush up higher, put it down lower, and then again, nice and dry. Want to make sure that nothing bleeds through. And as I continue adding layers, I want to make sure it's clean enough and dry enough that it will not smear or spread all over the place. So from here, the paper will start to warp. At the end, what I normally do when I'm doing ink smooshing cards is I will put them under something heavy to dry overnight. At this point, I add on some black splatters because the colors were looking good, but I really felt it needed a little bit more contrast. I use a Distress Oxide spray stain, the black soot, and then I will end up hitting it with a heat gun. So from here, I'm going to go ahead and clean up my glass mat because I don't want my card base to end up in piles of ink. I find when you're doing these kinds of projects, it's inevitable, but I try to mitigate it. When I placed the piece of DSP here, it looked a little too flat against the white card base, so I decided to go ahead and add the same colors that I used to do the ink smooshing onto the front of the card. And I went ahead and just sectioned it off to match where the houses divide from the blue to the green to the orange. And all the colors will be listed in the description below, and you can also find them on my blog post. I only used 3 colors for this card. I wanted to keep it simple, but I really wanted it to pop and look fun. It's a huge thing to be able to pay off a house, and I really thought it deserved a fun and vibrant card. So here I'm just going to continue adding until I get the layering right. I get it low enough so that you can see it on either side of the piece of DSP. And checking it as I go to see where I'm at and if I'm happy. And then it is Distress Oxide ink, so I'm going to I splattered water to lift up some of the color. Just kind of flicked it on with my hand and then used a paper towel to take up the splotchies. And as you can see, it just kind of pulls up some of the coloring because of that fun distress that we all love so much. And then I use the Mega Label Love Congrats from Alta New. And I just use the VersaFine Clear ink and stamp it out on a piece of cardstock. And I did take a chance by not using my Misty here because sometimes you want to re-ink this one because it's a nice thick, bold black background. Because I had that foam mat under it, I had much better luck with getting a nice image than if I hadn't used it. So I did get lucky. I was very happy about that. And then I'm just going to hand trim it. You can use a paper trimmer or a guillotine style cutter, whatever you want to use. For me, it was just the scissors were right there, so I just picked them up and started chopping it down. And the congrats, I love how it's so bold. I think it'll look really nice with the white and the different colors. It'll stand out and really get my point across. And I think it's pretty amazing, and congratulations on such a huge milestone for your life. And then I will end up putting this on some Simon Says foam tape, the Big Mama roll. I really love that. The thickness of it isn't really high, so it's more of a low profile dimension. And I like that for when you're mailing cards, because sometimes if the cards get too heavy, it's going to end up costing quite a bit to mail, which isn't a horrible thing, but if you send out 20 or 30 cards a week, that can add up pretty quick. So I like this low profile dimension tape. And then I'm just going to kind of put a little glue on it, because sometimes the foam tape doesn't always adhere when you're doing these thicker layers, and there's like little bumps in the paper from where the paper warped from all the water. So I just add a little bit of glue on the back of that foam tape and then press it down. And at this point, I'm looking at it and I really like it, but I feel like it just needs a little bit more splatter. Sometimes you just can't have enough splatter. So I'm going to add the spray stain picket fence as another bit of splatter, just to give the card a little more fun, because really, can you have too much splatter? And then that's like one of your worst nightmares right there. Big blop over the C on congrats. I started to panic, and then I stopped, and I'm like, you know what, just grab a paper towel, blot it up. Hopefully it'll dry lighter, because I have that VersaFine Claire Nocturne ink on there. And in the end, it did end up drying much lighter than what it looks like on the camera. So it worked out really well. And I didn't have to scrap it. For a second, I was like, that's it, I'm done. But then I went back and just wiped it up. And now at this point, it's going to need to dry. But this is pretty much the end of the card. And I want to say thank you